All right, I see a lot of people talking about no co-op, and that's something I've actually been thinking about. First of all, actually, let's before I talk about this, let's actually give props where prop is due. I've been very critical of a lot of IGN stuff, but I think this is a pretty good interview. I want to give a shout out to the interviewer. I think he did a pretty good job. The questions were great, and this gives us more insight into the game. I think those were relevant questions. So as much as we usually shit on IGN, I want to give props where credit is due. I think this was a great interview. So now that this is out of the way, I want to talk about co-op real quick. So here's the thing. I was, like most of you and like most people, I was disappointed that co-op was not in Armored Core, but I've been thinking about this right before going live, and I actually think that not having co-op for this particular game is a good thing. And the reason why is actually stems from my experience with Elden Ring. And I thought about this. Now that I have played Elden Ring for over a year, like some of you did, I was able to experience invading people at all levels, seeing the progression of all kinds of players throughout Elden Ring, and seeing how the players that play now, even 1 year after launch, still suck, like really bad. And I attribute people sucking at Elden Ring so bad due to the fact that Elden Ring, you can get carried through the entire game by somebody else that is over-leveled, or just being carried, like, period, by having a bunch of people play the game for you. And because Armored Core is going to be something that has not been experienced by the majority of the players that are going to play it, I think it's going to be better that people are forced into the game and people are forced into learning how to play the game. And I'm not talking specifically to my audience and the people in chat right now, or the people that are going to watch this on YouTube, because quite frankly, I think most of the people that consume my particular content are gamers, like actual gamers at heart that play games in a pretty hardcore manner. So I don't think this really applies to most of you guys, but I would say this probably applies to the majority of the player base who are going to play these games. I think these people need to be directed in the right direction. And what I mean by that is they're going to need to be directed in a way that they can play and learn the game properly, as opposed to have someone else play the game for them. Because even if it's fun to play a game with a buddy, a lot of time you can easily get carried by your buddy, and you're going to end up not really learning anything, or not really paying much attention to everything that's going on. And so I think it's actually for the better for the game to be single player focused, so that people can deep dive into the single player, kind of iron in on what they're doing and focus on learning the game properly. And as the interviewer talks about also in this, as the From Software representative, the producer, talks about in this interview, they've also had many measures put in place to help newcomers learn all the new mechanics that are in place. So all in all, speaking about the co-op, I think I've actually changed my stance on this. Before this trailer, I was actually pretty disappointed that there wasn't co-op, and I'm a big fan of co-op. But I changed my mind. I think it's probably for the best that this particular Armored Core does not have co-op. With that being said, though, after this Armored Core, once a lot of players have tried it, and once the game becomes more popular, because I think this is actually going to be the first Armored Core that's legitimately very successful. I genuinely believe that. So after that, I do think that for the next Armored Core, after this Armored Core 6, I think this next one should have co-op, because people will be used to these new mechanics. But I think for this particular one, for the grand scheme of things, it's better to have people learn how to play the game properly, and for the majority of the player to learn to appreciate what these games are all about, as opposed to having someone that carries them through the game. So now that's the co-op portion part out of the way. Let's talk about some of these other things that are mentioned in this interview. Also, don't forget to tag me in chat if you have questions, if you want to talk about some things, right? actually.
And by producer Yasunori Ogura to talk all about Armored Core 6. How are you?
What do you think about what they said about the PvP? So for the PvP, this follows, you know, normal marketing strategies. They are marketing the game to a broader audience, and they're marketing the PvE first, and the PvP, as it should, represents sort of like the end game. So once you've beaten the single player, once you've actually played all the single player content, and that's going to be true even for PvP mostly players. You guys are going to have to play through the PvE, through the campaign first. So this is actually kind of normal for them to advertise the PvE and then talk about the PvP at a later date, because that's also how you're going to be playing the game regardless. Like, you're going to be focusing on the PvE, gathering all the parts, learning all the new mechanics, all that stuff. And then afterward, once you've played a lot of the PvE, then you're going to start to delve into the PvP aspect. And I'm actually happy that he stresses in this interview again that they're going to dive deeper into the PvP side of things at a later date, because if they have to delve deeper, that means there's more to show for. And so I'm happy about that. For me, that's enough right now. And I think, you know, holding some of the PvP information for later makes more sense, especially given that the trailer we got now is so packed with new information and new mechanics just from the trailer alone, that it's already a lot to digest. I don't think you'd want to have the PvP also be in the mix as of right now. That's how I think. That's how I feel about the PvP. Yeah, they said they will have more weapons for melee in this game. So we've had a good look at that in the trailer earlier. There aren't, like, this is new from any, like, no Armored Core games prior to Armored Core 6 had this amount of variety in melee movesets. So usually all blades in Armored Core game has this straight on, like, the blade swing was just one blade arc in front of you, doesn't matter which blade weapon you had, and then pile drivers were always this like kind of punch motion. And for the first time here, we're seeing all these different melee weapons with different movesets like we covered earlier. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, it's pretty exciting, and I'm actually looking forward to that. And I feel like new players who are getting introduced to Armored Core for the first time are so lucky to have their first Armored Core games have all of these new features. It's so cool, honestly. Once we finish the story, you think we'll have enough cash to try out mini builds, weapon, PvP? Or you'll need to farm some money first? I have no idea. I don't know. But yeah, you don't have to, like Kime said, usually you don't have to farm for money, but you might have to do a few missions. I don't know how they're going to play this out. Usually, like, you have to worry about money once you're playing the game for the first time. So usually, like, the thing with money in Armored Core is that money is like a mechanic to punish failures. So, like, if you keep losing a mission, you just lose more and more money. And so it's actually like a mechanic put in place to, like, have you feel the weight of your failure. It was like that in our other Armored Core games, but after a certain point, you start to not really worry about money, because every time you succeed at a mission, you're usually going to get some money out of it. And usually that's not really an issue past a certain point. It's more like of a thing to hold weight for your first playthrough sort of deal. But I could be wrong, since this is a new Armored Core game. I don't know how they approach like the economics side of thing for the game. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to like how the money aspect is going to play out in that particular one. Yeah, in Armored Core Forenser, for example, once you've done all the campaign mission, you unlock all the parts. Yeah, like Kime said, once you beat the game, usually you unlock all the parts, but I don't know, sometimes there's parts like hidden throughout the world. I'm not sure if you unlock those by just beating the game. We're going to have to wait and see for this one. in Armored Core 1, if you have minus 50k, you restart the whole game on easier mode. Oh, really, Schmidt? I did not know this. That's actually funny. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be... Even, that's a PS1 thing. I don't think that's going to make a comeback. That would be frustrating for newcomers. Look, you have to keep in mind, like, some of these IGN reviewers are going to play this game. Like, do you really want to punish them like that bad? I don't think so. No, I think it's a good thing that they make Armored Core more welcoming to newcomers, and usually that's a bad thing when you want to kind of like dumb down your game for casual. Like, usually that's a bad thing, but for Armored Core, it's such a complicated game that it's actually a very good thing that they're like kind of like opening it up to more players, because honestly, as much as I love it as it is, like I've loved all the Armored Core games that I've played prior, it needs to have some features put in place and some things put in place to help new players out, because it was just too hard for someone new to understand all the new mechanics and all the parts and everything. So I think it's good that they talk about this in this interview, that they have like a mission structure put in place to help players understand the game. They have like a training mode and whatnot. That was in other Armored Core games, but I think it's a good thing that they're taking a closer look at that. Definitely a big positive.
Hi there, I'm great, thank you. I'm Yasunori Ogura from From Software, producer on Armored Core 6. It's great to be here.
How long has Armored Core 6 been developed?
You should peek at the PlayStation blog. It has some real good information, like Assault Boost and Stagger. Is that old stuff? Because we've aside from everything that came out today, we've already taken a look at everything Armored Core related in all previous interviews and information. So unless this is a new blog from today, I might take a look at it if it's new from today. Otherwise, I've already looked at it. It's brand new? All right, thank you. I'll take a look at it afterward.
And what has it been like for From Software to return to this franchise that was such a big part of the company for such a long time?
So we have been cultivating development staff through our experience with recent titles, and there were many members of staff, including Miyazaki and myself.
Also, it's rare that they put music in interviews, but for whatever reason, IGN decided to put some really, like, some really good, like, moody soundtrack behind this. Like some of the trailer soundtrack, I think. And it's actually, it makes the interview look like sound almost tense. I actually love it. Like, you don't see that very often. Look at that.
Our experience with recent titles, and there were many members of staff, including Miyazaki and myself, who've wanted to make a new Armored Core game for a long time. So really, not making a new Armored Core was never really an option.
Not making a new Armored Core was never an option. That's what I like to hear.
It was a case of when rather than if. As to the game's direction and development, in around 2018, Miyazaki and some core members of the team began initial direction and forming the basic core concept.
Okay, so the development started in 2018. It's funny because Armored Core was in the plan. I would say the development. Wait, let's hear what he said exactly.
Direction. 18 Miyazaki game's direction and development in around 2018. As to the game's direction and development in around 2018.
Okay, direction and development, because I know they've talked about Armored Core in pre-production even all the way back to 2016. So, but like he said, it wasn't their intention for a long time. But either way, that's, you know, past stuff. Like, games coming out in August now.
Miyazaki and some core members of the team began initial direction and forming the basic core concept of AC6. And after prototyping was complete, our director Yamamura took over on the project. However, as you know, we have several projects going on at the same time within the company. So we had to get an ideal allocation of resources, we had to get the right staff on board, which resulted in a slightly longer wait, but we're happy to finally bring a new Armored Core to our fans.
So, can you tell...
Good stuff, honestly. So yeah, talking about the development time, that it took a while, but here we
A
are.
little bit about the story of Armored Core 6 and whether newcomers will be able to jump right into this entry if they haven't played any of the other ones.
About the story, I think it's one interesting thing about the story. I'm gonna be honest, the story for Armored Core games have always been kind of like, you know, it's never really been about the story much. And a lot of people describe like some of the other Armored Core stories as a bit cringe and corny with the voices. And I have to be honest, I'm getting the same feel again when it comes to like the Walter and whatever. So I don't really care much about that stuff, but don't have like the highest expectations for like some deep story. Like chances are it's going to be like some Walter some Walter name dropping.
This is a brand new story and has no direct link to previous titles. AC6 takes place in a future where interstellar travel is commonplace, not on Earth, but on a fictional planet in a distant star system called Rubicon 3.
So again, I want to stress that you do not need to have played other Armored Core games to get into this one, even if this is Armored Core 6. Numbered Armored Core are always reboot, or nearly always reboot, and this is no exception. So this has no link to previous Armored Core games, and therefore newcomers will feel like this game is basically like a new entry, really, like a new reboot.
Rubicon is a devastated planet that was razed to ash in a great disaster caused by the outbreak of a mysterious new substance called coral.
Activating cerebral coral control device.
This is interesting though, the cerebral coral. Like someone said that you might actually be a clone in this. That's actually a good point. As far as the story goes, like we can speculate as much as we want. I'm interested to see how the story develops, but my expectations, I would say, are fairly low when it comes to the actual narrative behind this. And you know, these games are mostly about the gameplay. Like the gameplay is like top tier. Story is going to be a bonus if it's good.
Which occurred half a century before the events of the game take place. At the outset of the game and the story, the player learns that coral, which was thought lost in this great disaster, has been rediscovered, and extraterrestrial corporate forces have begun an invasion race to acquire the rights to this mysterious and powerful new substance.
That sounds badass though, the whole like invasion race. And like with against aliens, like you're having like an invasion race on a planet with aliens. Like to me, like that's actually like kind of badass. Like that's pretty appealing. I like the whole premise of this setting though. Like that's kind of nice. I like that. I like that.
Acquire the rights to this mysterious and powerful new substance. So they are
acquire the rights, quote unquote. Acquired by force.
conflict with the indigenous forces who are resisting their invasion on the planet Rubicon. And the player, as a lone independent mercenary and AC pilot, is...
I'm curious to know, like, how does an independent mercenary fits into all of this? Like, do you get to work with aliens if you want to? Like, how does that play out? Or wouldn't you be, like, always on the human side of things? This is going to be interesting how this plays out. Yeah, you're always a mercenary in Armored Core games, but given the setting here, like where you're sort of like a mercenary in the context of like alien races doing like an alien invasion racing for the right to a resource. This kind of fits like in a weird way. Like this makes me curious as to how you're gonna. Like, how is your role going to play out in all of this? Could be a translation error. I don't know. What could be? To be honest, by aliens, he probably meant, like, off-world corporations. Oh, right. Yeah, you actually might be correct. That might make more sense, actually. Yeah. So, basically, humans are aliens to this world, kind of, right? And so we have different human or different alien corporations that could be invading this. Yeah, that's a very good point that you're bringing, actually, because this would make more sense. Yeah, this would make more sense, actually. Yeah. Yeah, we're the aliens. Yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. I think I missed the mark on my previous assessment. I think you're correct on that.
Thrust into this Rubicon war for the Coral. So although AC6 is a numbered title, the setting and story are completely new, and we believe it makes a great first entry into the series for newcomers and old fans alike.
We're close to Rubicon. Wake the dog up.
So let's
wake the dog up.
Talk a little bit about Rubicon as a setting. Is there anything that's unique about the planet that will allow for kind of unique mission structures that people haven't seen in the Armored Core series previously?
There are two things we'd like to convey to both newcomers and old hands to the series. Armored Core offers two unique game experiences. First is this dynamic, three-dimensional action that can only be achieved with mechs. And the second is the ability to customize your own personal AC by combining multiple parts and decorating it to your liking with painting and decals and the like.
So what he's saying here basically is he's highlighting the strong points of Armored Core games. So again, strong points of Armored Core have always been the 3D action combat and the movement. You know, the everything about like 3D movement, flying different direction, quick bursts of speeds, and then the customization. So it's good again that he's highlighting this. So for people who've played Armored Core before, this is everything that you already know and love. And for the newcomers, this is what you're going to be loving. Trust me on that.
These player-assembled, player-controlled ACs are able to fly freely through the air and handle multiple weapons simultaneously and turn on a dime, dash in different directions at once. This makes for a dynamic and very aggressive combat style that makes full use of the three-dimensional space, and we feel
aggressive
has always been an appeal of the Armored Core series and is an appeal of the mech action genre.
Brenna, thanks for the raid. Welcome in, raiders. We're doing a breakdown of this IGN interview. We've done a breakdown of the new Armored Core 6 trailer just now. So yeah.
For die-hard Armored Core fans, what are the elements of Armored Core 6 that those hardcore fans are going to find appealing about this game?
With AC6, one area we focused on was to make sure that the customization aspect is not just about parameters going up and down and numerical values changing, but how these changes are reflected in the feel of the action as much as possible.
So when he says that they're making like conscious effort so that your build choices have a concrete impact on gameplay, if I'm being honest, I think this was already represented greatly in other Armored Core games in mobility. And this is going to be the case even more given that all melee weapons seem to have a unique moveset that's going to have like a different feel here. So very interesting to see how this plays out. I'm also interested to see how different boosters are going to play a role in movement. In previous Armored Core games, different boosters gave like a massive difference in how you traverse the world. And so I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out in this particular Armored Core, but good things to hear so far overall.
In particular, the leg parts, which control the AC's movement, you might have a tank type legs that can perform drift turns, and this changes the
drift turns. Though performing drift turns, I don't think I've seen that in previous Armored Core games. This is interesting because tanks have always been like suffering from like pretty bad mobility, so the introduction of drift turn might be like a big deal for tank gameplay. This is going to be another one of those like very interesting new mechanics that they're bringing to the table. Very interested about that.
Very basic behavior, tank type legs that can perform drift turns, and this changes the very basic behavior and traversal type of the AC. We also made sure that the behavior of weapons, such as the way they shoot, how they recoil, how their projectiles behave. We tried to make sure that this all makes a big difference in how the game feels and plays.
That's actually very interesting. This is something that I did not necessarily notice in the trailer, but as much as he mentions melee weapons having like a unique moveset, and we see it in the trailer, he mentions the behavior of projectiles. So talking about how every different weapon has a different like projectile behavior. So that means like maybe no two missile launchers are going to fire missiles the same way, which that actually could be a departure from previous Armored Core games. Like, yes, missile all had like their unique like you know, way of shooting, but this might actually be like brought to a new level. Like if like everything really fires in a different way, that could be quite interesting gameplay wise.
Or that this all makes a big difference in how the game feels and plays.
Do you need good aim in this game? No, you don't need good aim. You have AC parts that do the aiming for you. And as much as there are some weapons that are completely free aim, 90% of weapons are function with a integrated lock-on mechanic. And this lock-on is affected by different body parts, internal computer chips, and whatnot. And the gameplay is mostly focused around movement as opposed to focus around aiming. So I would compare a shooter game to be a bit the opposite. A shooter game is less about movement, more about aim. As much as the movement is important in a shooter, aiming is more important than in a shooter. Having perfect aim is going to be more important in a shooter than having perfect movement. In this game, it's going to be the opposite. In this game, it's going to be more important to have perfect movement as opposed to having perfect aim. But it's all about keeping track of your opponent while you're moving.
So speaking a little bit about that customization, Armored Core games have a bit of a reputation for being very complex with many stats to consider.
That's an understatement. Armored Core games have been maybe even a bit too complex for a new person to get into it, which is also why Armored Core games to this day, until Armored Core 6 is going to change that, but to this day it's been very niche and borderline a commercial failure when it comes to like how popular these games were. Really only the only reason Armored Core were like done over and over is because they were popular in Japan, but outside of Japan it's never really been really successful. So this is actually quite interesting because for the first time ever, Armored Core 6 is going to try to be a successful game worldwide, and this is going to be a first for an Armored Core game. And this will not be possible if the game is not approachable for newcomers. And so they definitely needed to change something in that regard, and he's going to speak about that.
In and out. Is there anything else that you guys are planning on doing with Armored Core 6 to make it a little more approachable for newcomers who might not be used to that level of complexity?
As you mentioned, Armored Core has always been a game with many parameters and is a game where you can enjoy the complexity and depth it offers, but we feel it's also a game where you can enjoy simply by assembling your AC without thinking too deeply about it, and adjust the appearance to your liking and simply get out there and pilot it and take it into combat. That said, in regard to new players, we've taken careful steps with the onboarding and level design in the early stages of the game, so that players can deepen their understanding step by step, little by little, and work their way into that fun of the more complex parts.
So what I like here is that he's talking about basically a learning curve, how for the first few missions, they're basically going to hold your hand, is what I'm hearing here. They're going to hold your hand for the first few missions, leading up to the complexity, because the complexity is still here, as he mentions right here.
That fun of the more complex parts.
Yeah, because Armored Core games, no matter how you look at it, it's always going to be a complicated game with a lot of different parameters that directly affect gameplay. So I think this is a good approach. We'll see how this plays out. I hope new players will get to enjoy the game. I hope new players will get to stick with the game, because my fear for newcomers is that some people might actually get frustrated by not understanding what's going on. But if they do address that, that's going to be a big win for this game, and quite frankly, a big reason why it might lead to their success. Do you recommend to play this game on console or PC? I cannot really recommend one or the other because it depends on how they integrate it. So like as a rule of thumb, usually it's always better to play games on PC if you have a good rig. The only downside for PC is the poor optimization sometimes, like poor ports. Like for instance, Elden Ring is pretty bad on PC, like it doesn't run as well as PlayStation. So you have that. And then the other reason why you would not want to play on PC is cheaters online. So those two things I can't really talk about right now because the game is not out. But if those things are not an issue, then games are always played best on PC. So that's that.
We've also prepared a training simulator where the player can learn the basics of action and assembly.
Training simulators is something that's been in pretty much any Armored Core that I've played that I remember. There's always been training simulators. So yeah, that should not really be something that's new really. But everyone is going to use the training simulators to tune up their AC, no matter who they are, whether they're new players or veterans.
Using sample ACs, and we've also tried to make the controls more intuitive. So
that's a good thing, making the control more intuitive. I believe that you will be able to customize your controls exactly how you want them. They already did that with the latest Armored Core game. They've done that with Elden Ring. I believe they'll do that again, but having the base controls be more intuitive is going to be a good thing for sure. Because I don't believe that Armored Core has nailed good controls in all their other Armored Core games. I always change the control for something custom that I was more comfortable with, and I believe that my custom controls were more optimal and felt better than their default controls. So if they tune their default controls to be better for more people, because not everyone is going to take the time to customize their controls as they want it, I think this is a good thing.
We hope that those who have no experience with the series will feel free to enter and enjoy the feel of piloting their very own Armored Core.
Are there any lessons that you guys have learned over the many years you've spent developing the Souls games that you take into the development of Armored Core 6, even though they're kind of two very different genres?
Armored Core 6 is an attempt to take both the knowledge and experience gained from the development of our previous titles and combine it with the fun of mech customization that the AC series has always embraced. And in this sense, we hope to create a new mech action game that is worthy of modern From Software standards. Specifically, we're developing this game with an awareness of the things that From Software has always embraced in its other action games, such as a intricate map structure, combat design that allows players to deal with enemies by carefully observing their movements, and the ability to overcome challenging situations with ingenuity and creativity.
This is interesting because the part where he talks about players having to learn, like learning enemies move, watching the enemy's movement and then learning from it. This is clearly like a Souls feature. This has never really been like a core aspect of Armored Core games. Like learning through movement, like I said, like when you're playing Armored Core games, like most enemies behave sort of like the same, and you don't really have to learn movesets per se. You just have to learn like how to avoid like various types of attacks, but there's not like any movesets per se in other Armored Core games. Like this, for the first time, as we've seen in the trailer, bosses have clear movesets and clear like attack patterns that you're gonna have to play around. And there's also the same thing for melee weapons. Like you have a lot more animations, like brand new animations in this particular Armored Core. So this speaks volume to the amount of work and love they poured into this one.
These are all, of course, things we've kept in mind with AC6 as well. However, as you mentioned, the basic format and genre of Armored Core is completely different from games in, for instance, the Souls lineage. So there are no aspects of the game mechanics or gameplay that can be directly observed.
You ready to climb the wall?
I love how he's saying that, you know, to shut the whole like narrative of like some people still expect like a Souls-like Armored Core game, like they don't know what they're in for. So I think this trailer should like should hopefully like educate some of the newer fans who don't really pay attention necessarily to like interviews and all that stuff. Like maybe they're still expecting like Armored Core to be a Souls game. Hopefully, this trailer shows that this is a completely new game, a different game.
You talk a little bit about your goals with the combat design, and are there any kind of mechanics that players should know about that perhaps didn't exist in previous Armored Core games?
In terms of points we focused on this time around, I would say that individuality of the melee weapons is one of the key points.
Oh yeah, like for sure, like we've gone over when we watched the preview. Like for the first time ever, we have different melee weapons animation, like distinct from one another. Like no blade feels the same. Like we had this blade earlier with like the overhead swing, and then we had this blade that's like almost like a twin blade with the spinning, and then we had the other blade that did 2 swipes. Like all the melee weapons have a distinctive feel, and that's never really been the case for other Armored Core games. Like all blade weapon had the same animation, and then you had pile drivers that also had all the same animation. So for the first time ever, every melee weapon seems to have their own unique identity. This is going to be interesting, and this might also play a big role to bring melee weapons and to a more... It might be more like melee weapons might be more important than previous Armored Core games for that, because they might be better for the first time than like just going full range weapons. Because in most Armored Core games, it was better to just go full melee weapons, at least in PvP, as opposed to with blades. You could have a pure blader, but for the most part, like a better mechs were usually mechs that were equipped with only weapons. So for the first time, maybe melee weapons will have their distinctive, like optimal use cases for different playstyles and different situations. That's going to be very interesting to see.
Core is mainly a shooting game at heart, and that's exactly why we had this policy of having more unique melee weapons this time around. So in addition to the well-known pile bunker and the cluster bomb launcher that you might have seen in the trailer, there are also a variety of weapons with different animations and more unconventional characteristics, such as a chainsaw and a laser lance, and things like this. In the
I wonder if the blue one we saw was the laser lance. There's also that whip that we saw, and there's the flamethrower. There's a lot of different weapons that have unique, distinctive feel and unique animations.
Trailer, you may have also seen a part where the core is deployed by an AC to generate a shockwave, and the pile bunker is then used against an opponent who is reeling back from this shockwave. This kind of building combos with multiple weapons aspect is an appeal of AC6's unique assembly and combat, and we hope the players will enjoy using their creativity and asking themselves, what combination of weapons can I use to create my ideal combo attacks and secure victory?
So is there...
The whole combo attack thing is also something that's new. As much as you could have a gameplay focused around like you want to build your mech with weapon that synergizes well with each other. Like for instance, you're not like in previous Armored Core games, you would not necessarily have put like a blade and then a missile launcher at the same time, because the missile launchers were more like long range for the open, as opposed to blades were more for like narrow, like more useful for like narrow pathways where the target didn't have as much like room to move. So you would not have mixed like the two of them together for pretty much, right? And same thing for like if you were to use rifles, for most of the time it would have been better to have 2 rifles in both hands to maximize your damage output, as opposed to having like 1 missile launcher in one hand and then a rifle in the other, which could have been a good idea in open, but for the most part, the whole combo thing had never really been like a thing. So it seems like with the combo they're adding like some sort of like effect to like some various attack with the stagger system. So like it seems like in the trailer, like the missile stagger, and then while the enemies are staggered from the missile, then it leaves like a window of opportunity for like various other attacks. And so like you get the missile and then you go in for a melee attack, for instance. We don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but this is definitely a new thing.
Any one new thing, whether it's a mechanic or a mech part or a weapon, that you're particularly proud of and are excited for players to experience in Armored Core 6?
I'd like players to mostly look forward to something we touched on earlier, which is this using their ingenuity and creativity to create a combination of their own making, and a combination of the various parts and weapons at their disposal. So for example, they might be dashing across the battlefield while shooting ballistic weapons and letting missiles fly in every which direction. These missiles will connect with their enemy, knock them off balance, and then they'll use their assault boost to dash in with a quick burst of speed and finish with a melee strike. This kind of player-created combo and their own unique combination of weaponry and mobility will allow for this new aggressive, offensive style of AC combat, and we hope this is something that reinvigorates the series and that new and old fans alike can enjoy.
Aggressive combat. That's what we like to hear.
Multiplayer has always been a big part of the Armored Core series. Is there anything you can tell us about multiplayer in Armored Core 6?
So I believe ACV was more focused on multiplayer as the last title in the series, but first of all, the main content of AC6 is positioned as a single-player campaign mode where you progress through a more traditional mission structure. There will be an online PvP mode where players can compete against each other with ACs they have built and share their AC.
When he says and share their AC data, that means that you're going to be able to trade the schematics of your own mech to someone else. So if you want to like share your mech with other people or your friend, you're going to be able to share like the exact details down to the parts and the paint jobs and the emblem. So everything you create, you're going to be able to share with other players. And yes, of course, PvP is confirmed, but it was confirmed before this trailer as well and before this interview.
Data and emblems of their own making with other users. But first and foremost, the story missions in AC6 are single player only. We would like players to go in there, become the lone mercenary lifestyle, and enjoy this aspect of the game first and foremost. We do hope to share more details about the online aspect at a later date.
We hope to share more detail about the online aspect at a later date. So this might not seem like a lot, but this leaves me very hopeful because if there wasn't anything else about the multiplayer, well, all the information will already be said, really. So if it was just about having an arena and some lobbies, well, that's it. We already know this. So the fact that there's more information to come like leaves me kind of excited for the PvP aspect as well. And like I mentioned previously, they don't need to talk about this right now because right now we already have plenty of information about the game itself, and the PvP for these games is more like an end game activity. So we have not even played the main game yet. We're not to the end game at all. Like, we're still learning about the new mechanics and the new gameplay features and all of this. So there's no rush to learn about the PvP side of things. It's just good to know that it's still in store and we're going to learn more about it in the future. So very happy about that. Daddy Murdoch, thanks for the resub for 20 months. Really appreciate it.
So please stay tuned for that.
Let's see how far they can fly on borrowed wings.
All right, well, that about wraps it up. Oguro-san, thank you so much for your time. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon is set for release this August 25th on PS4, PS5, Xbox, and PC. Thanks for watching, and for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.
All right, well, guys. That's it for this interview. Well, all in all, pretty excited. Good stuff, honestly. Really good information. A lot of new things. A lot of new concepts, new mechanics. Game looks great. good levels, good weapons, new stuff. I'm so excited. Big positive. Big positive for this game. Honestly, this gets me like very excited. Like all this new Armored Core stuff. It injects happiness into my veins, for sure. Wow. The best part about it is that it's coming in the end of August. Yeah, it's actually not that far, man. End of August is not too far. Like, we don't have to, like, survive for half a year. We only have until August, so we're good.